All right, Gerald, you've got the microphone. You're next, and I'll try to come back.
Hi, I'm Gerald Duquette. I teach in political science. I don't claim to be the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, but I really have tried hard to listen and pay attention to the lecture. I tried to take some notes. And I'm struck by the difficulty of listening to your remarks because someone who's trying to listen critically is sort of interrupted every few minutes with some personal characterization that you throw in as some type of fact. And while I'm trying to understand your argument, you tell me some guy's a disaster, or he's the evil, or he's the devil, or some other thing that I personally couldn't ascertain through any methods that I know of. So I wonder if you have superpowers, or and the problem is that I'm distracted from what might well be a fine argument. And as I'm listening and struggling to get past characterizations that I know to be foolish to sort of get to the meat of your argument, I ask myself, how would I grade a student presentation with this kind of material in it? What would I do if a student claimed to know that a person is evil or is a total disaster, or the sort of over-the-top characterizations of individuals, which I don't understand how there could be a basis, in fact, for such characterizations. My question to you is, tell me, a classroom instructor, how your style of delivery, which may be masking arguments that I would have thought interesting, how that's helping students in the audience to understand how to make cogent arguments. In other words, my problem isn't that you're making crazy arguments. Your remarks about the Middle East are not only conventional, they're very common. So there's nothing unique about those. But they were interesting and at some level thoughtful. But your characterizations from start to finish of various people, from Bismarck to everybody, you seem to have knowledge of things that only they in their minds could know. I thought it was interesting that you characterized as factual people's intentions. And so I wonder, when I'm trying to explain the difference between facts and subjective criteria, how is your lecture going to help me? How are you going to help me to teach undergraduates to think clearly and not to take specific instances and imbue them with worlds of significance, or not to make comments about someone's personality you couldn't possibly have substantive knowledge of and then call that a piece of factual data? So, in other words, I'm distracted by all that. How can you cut through all that and tell me what you really want to say?
Well, I told you what I really wanted to say. Okay, no, it's very simple. You're underestimating what I do and what I base this on. That everything I've said is based on fact, is based on my experience with this process, which most people in this room are not experienced with. But it's my business to represent what I know. Now, in a situation like this with a limited time scale, you have two problems. You have to say what is true, and you have to say it in a summary fashion, and don't say if it's not true. That's my standard. I've said nothing to you, I've said nothing to this audience which is not factually true to my knowledge.
Your knowledge?
That's right.
You don't understand the difference between truth and fact, then?
I do.
Because you can't factually characterize someone's intentions unless you have it in their head.
Oh, yes, you can.
Oh, no, you can't.
Well, sometimes we do that with, sometimes.
I hope that any student in the audience is not being fooled by that insane comment.
It's not insane.
That it is a fact that I am now intending something.
Well, how do you tell the opinion of a toad and a centipede? Can you talk to either of them?
Is that a non sequitur?
No, it is not. I mean, the point is, how do you tell the intention of a toad? That's by the way in which the actions are organized. You see, the point is, no, those are facts. No, you misunderstand facts. Now,
Why should I be different than he? He didn't come here to hear you talk.
now you.
Gerald, thank you for letting him answer. He's going to answer now. Thank you very much. Yeah, Gerald.
Oh, No, maybe I have. You just haven't listened to it. Now listen, Joe. Listen. Hey, quiet down. Calm down. Well, get calm. It's good for you. It's better for your cardiac health and well-being. The point is, we're dealing with a society which you're talking about and defending, and very angry about the fact that I've impinged my views on it, because you're talking about a liberal view of fact and reality. I don't accept the liberal view of fact and reality. In fact, I know better. That, for example, take a case, you probably know something about this. Take the case of dynamics. What's the difference between Descartes and Leibniz? What is Leibniz's attack on Descartes? Why is Descartes a faker? Because of the method he uses, which is the method you're defending. The assumption of self-evident fact, as if it were a little ball being kicked around someplace. What determines the course of history is, and as in physical processes, is what's called dynamics. This is not something I invented. This is well known in history, for example, in the work of the Pythagoreans and Plato. The concept of dynamis. It's the concept of Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley, in the concluding paragraph of his defense of poetry. That there are dynamical processes, as he emphasizes, in the creative moments of mankind, where we see a principle being expressed by a population. But not all the people who express that opinion as a result share the motive which leads to it. And yet the greatest moments in history come from that kind of inspiration. Therefore, there are certain kinds of ideas which empiricists do not accept, as you don't.
Well, just use a different word then.
No, it's not.
Use a word that has a meaning that you don't agree with. Everyone else here is fact. They thought that you were talking about a fact.
I am talking about a fact.
Now you're talking about a dynamic truth.
That's it. No, dynamics is a fact.
No.
Well,
No, there's a definition for the word fact, and you're not using it.
I don't.
All I'm asking you is use the right word.
Gerald, maybe I can convince the people here to have you give the first lecture next year, and then we can listen to you. Let him answer, and we'll go to the last one. Gerald, you had your say. Answer him briefly, and we'll go to two more questions.
Okay. Well, look, the point is, you don't understand or accept the concept of dynamics. What you're expressing, what you're doing.
All right, we're going to the next person for the question.
Yes, I would like to return to something Mr. LaRousse had said earlier. Would you explain to, for those who might not know, what the Julian the Apostle, apostate philosophy is being used by the British oligarchy?
Yeah. And this is a general principle of imperial oligarchy, which is, Julian was not unique in this, but he's famous for it. And therefore he's much quoted because he's the simplest illustration of the case. He's such a clear-cut case that he's used by the British and others to explain the point. What has happened is the use of religion and beliefs which have the character of religious choices as opposed to scientific choices as a basis for organizing conflict in society. And thus, by using these differences to put one part of society against the other, you're able to distract the attention of society from the common issue, the problem of society, and you're distracted by fighting one another over these issues, these so-called religious issues. For example, in the history of religion, or the modern history of religion, the concept of ecumenicism, as in Cousé's notion of de pace fide, the peace among religions, is an essential principle of the state. of society. You must have peace among religions. Because that is the way, the disruption of peace among religions is the way in which mankind is set against mankind. Therefore, you can allow religions, but you cannot allow them to be used to one group of people to attempt to destroy the other, particularly within the same society. Now, you have, in addition to religions, you have phenomena which have a religious character, such as liberalism. Now, take the case, what is liberalism? And in this room, I think everybody's been exposed, heavily dosed, to liberalism, because this is what is taught in most universities and is most popular in English-speaking society and other parts of society, as distinct from a very special kind of liberalism called positivism. In these societies, Paolo Sarpi based himself on the religious irrationalism of a medieval character. And this was his system of society. His argument was, and the argument of his Galileo and other followers and accomplices of Sarpi, is that mankind must not be allowed to know principles, such as scientific principles. However, what Sarpi did, which is why he was able to defeat the Aristotelians in the period of the religious war from 1492 to 1648, was he said that what was happening in that period was that the influence of Cusa's reform, as carried out by people like Louis XI and carried out by Henry VII of England, that these reforms had promoted a great spirit of innovation in the people who had been largely treated as serfs. And you had, especially centered in the cities, in a movement which was unleashed by Louis XI of France and also by Henry VII in England. The ordinary people, the serf-like people of the cities and the countryside, who had been oppressed as serfs, now were participating in the process of innovation. And as was, and Machiavelli pointed out in his military studies, what had happened was that the armies of the Habsburgs, in particular, going into the field of battle with serried ranks as they were supposed to be, were losing the war while winning many of the battles. And the reason was the ordinary people, as was pointed out by Machiavelli, the ordinary people of the cities as artisans were now becoming innovative. And therefore, in dealing with the Habsburg attacks, they were able to innovate in ways which outwitted the dumb organization of the troops of the Habsburgs. So what the compromise that came up with Sarpi said, okay, we will allow innovation, we will not allow science. We will not allow Cusa, Nicholas of Cusa, which is science. We will allow mechanical innovation, or we will selectively allow it if we don't think it's bad for us. And we will use that, that toleration for innovation, which is what is called the Anglo-Dutch liberal principle, which dominates the United States thinking in universities and elsewhere today. We will allow people to innovate and to come up with mathematical formulas, but we will now let them come up with the concept of principle as such. And that's the point. Now, this was the issue between these liberals and actually Kepler, who discovered gravitation. They didn't. And Leibniz, who developed modern science. They didn't. And Riemann, who actually developed modern science further, and they didn't. And Einstein, who defended these guys from Kepler through Riemann, and they didn't. And so therefore the idea of principle as such, as a concept, as a factual concept, does not exist in liberalism. And when you come up with a proof of principle of this type, which is alien to liberalism, you get a liberal freak out over the fact that you've raised something which is provable, and they say it's not provable because it's not a fact in the sense of liberalism as Paolo Sarpi defined it. And that's what the issue is.